Was humbly requested to come closer, inshallah. Those outside as well, please come close, inshallah. Inshallah, Mufti Amir Isap is currently doing khidmat in London. Mashallah, he's actually from Preston. Mashallah, many people will know him. However, Mashallah, Maulana has done hijrah to London and is serving as an imam in London. He's also set up his own institute as well, Zidna Education, where he has many courses, etc. as well. So, inshallah, Maulana will enlighten us, inshallah, with his words of wisdom, inshallah. Brothers, humbly requested, try and come close, inshallah, to the gathering.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli wa nusallimu ala rasulih al-kareem ma ba'd. This can go one of two ways. I have something I'm thinking of possibly discussing, but also because it's like a youth event and we've got some of you guys here and there's some sisters present as well. And so I'd also be interested in kind of throwing the ball out to you guys. So there's some of the guys sat on this side and some of you youngsters over here as well. I'm interested to kind of hear from you guys just before I start. Normally questions are at the end, but kind of what are the things that you are struggling with? Now that's a very personal question, so it might be more kind of what do you think or what have you seen others struggling with? I don't know, maybe these guys on the side can start, some of the elder guys. Maybe you guys could start, or anybody can kind of throw out to us, because I'm getting old, so I don't kind of know what you guys are doing these days. What is it that Muslims are struggling with these days? What do you think? Social media? Okay, that's definitely, I mean, that's definitely one that comes up everywhere. That's something which I think will remain something that, okay, we'll talk on social media. Let's do something on social media. What else? Comes into social media. Anything else? Liberalism, modernity, some of these discussions. Okay. Fair enough. Anything else? Drugs? Is drugs quite common around here? No, I'm being serious. I'm being serious. By the way, I genuinely don't know. And by the way, in some places, like I'll give you examples. Take South Africa, for example. There are a couple of generations ahead of us. They have a huge drug pandemic, especially amongst the Muslims. And even though he's mentioning drugs now, it's going to happen eventually within our communities. As much as we think it's not going to happen, it's going to happen. And so this is something that, because there are a few generations ahead of us. So even though we might kind of scoff at it now because we've not come across it, like if somebody was to say to you, you know, kind of Muslims becoming atheist kind of thing, we'll probably laugh at it. But there's good Muslims, good Muslim households that we know of and Shaykh will know of as well in communities. Mullah Huzaifa has probably definitely been engaged in these discussions. So it's, you know, these are, again, it depends. The circles that he might know, they might, you know, he might know that there is some sort of engagement in these things taking place. What else? I think we've got enough to be getting on with, inshallah. Okay, let's start. And then we'll take specific questions as well, inshallah. Now, I guess when it comes to social media, the discussions can be based around fundamentally the verses that we discussed today, or we kind of actually read in the Quran and the Taraweeh today. And those were to do with the verses of Surah Yusuf. The story of Yusuf is actually a very interesting story, and as you know that we read Surah Yusuf today, a chunk of it. And so there is a specific verse where Yusuf alayhi salam is faced with some of these challenges of social media. Now, I want you to really think about this, and then I'm going to present some other ideas to you, inshallah. If you want to pick up a mushaf, you can pick up a mushaf. I'll be looking at the specific verse for this social media discussion. وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. Look, Yusuf alayhi salam is in the home. Okay. Let's preface this whole thing first. Why are we talking about Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam? You know, Allah, the way He operates, it's, if you've ever studied psychology, the way psychology works is they study archetypes. So for example, they'll take a case study of somebody who went through certain things. And then they will make notes and they will say, okay, this person, they went through these things, these were the symptoms, etc. And we saw this in 30 different cases. So we can now then say, generally speaking, when somebody suffers this, these are. So archetypes, or where you're studying a certain individual to determine and understand other humans. That's how psychology works. You look at case studies and then you'll say, okay, this research was done, this is what we found, therefore we can apply this across the board. Allah does this in a beautiful way. The stories of prophets are archetypes. They're going to go through some of the craziest of incidents in their lives. And Allah is teaching us that nothing you'll go through will get to that level, but it will have some resemblance to that. You need to seek recourse to the lives of the prophets. And so Yusuf alayhi salam's life is a very interesting one. But we're talking now specifically, where is he? He's been down the well, he's been dragged out of the well, and he's been pushed around in the slave trade. He's ended up and he's been sold, and now he's in Egypt. And in Egypt, he's at the house of this minister, this kind of politician. Right now, this politician, as we know how politicians operate, they say one thing in front of the camera, they'll say one thing behind the camera. Their homes are slightly different to the homes of the general public, etc. There's a level of lavish kind of lifestyle that is being lived. And so Yusuf alayhi salam is living in this home. And as a politician, the politician living in the house, he's rarely there. He's not always at home. He's out and about and with his duties and things like this. And so Yusuf alayhi salam is in his workplace. Let's use it as workplace, because that's what it is, right? So we all go to work, etc. We're at our workplaces. And Yusuf alayhi salam is, by necessity of his workplace, having to interact with a woman. He's having to interact with a woman, meaning she comes into they're living in the same house, right? But that's his workplace. So she's walking past, he has to interact. She says, look, I need this from you. He has to interact. And we're in our workplaces interacting with women as well. Let's be realistic. The majority of us in our workplaces, there will be interactions taking place with women. So Allah is presenting to us a scenario which we might not frame it in this way. But when you think about it, that's actually our story. That's exactly our story for the majority of us in the workplace. I was at the just after for the Jum'ah. I was in the Preston prison with Sheikh Junaid, and he was kind of we did the Jum'ah there, and he was taking me around. And a lot of his work is kind of revolved around different individuals, and he's having to professionally interact with this woman and this person and that person and that person, and you can't realistically not engage with them in these kind of professional settings. And so now Allah is saying, look, that's a reality that you'll be faced with sometimes. You need to learn how to navigate it. Now there's one thing we can do. We can say, Toba, astaghfirullah. No, you shouldn't work in this workplace. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't even go Tesco. If you go to Tesco, the woman at the till, you should say, I'm going to sit there and wait until a man comes on the till. And there is that option which a person can attempt, but that's not the realistic option. And so the Quran takes a realistic approach. That you are going to have professional interactions with, for example, a woman in your workplace. There are things that you need to bear in mind. And so that's the reality that Allah posits here. Now, Allah skips kind of all of the kind of fluff and all of these kind of things. And He jumps to وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. And so, by the way, just to give you an understanding, in the previous verse, Allah actually talks about Him giving hikmah and ilm to Yusuf alayhi salam. Hikmah is wisdom, ilm is knowledge. So Allah is saying, I gave wisdom and knowledge to Yusuf alayhi salam. Immediately after this, in the next verse, Allah is now going to test that. When Allah will give you blessings, Allah will test you in those blessings. That's lesson number one. You'll get wealth in your life, you'll get family in your life, you'll get children in your life, you'll get all sorts of things in your life. You'll get intellect in your life. You might be the smart one. You might be the one who Allah's given good looks to. You might be the one Allah's given charm to. And you've got, what they call it, Riz these days, isn't it? W Riz. So you've got, you man are mad, man. So you've got, all of these things. Allah might have blessed you with these things. Half the people won't even know what that is. So Allah blesses different people with different stuff, right? And so Allah will test us on these blessings. Allah will test us on these blessings. And really, that's really what we need to understand. And I said this to the guys in prison as well. I said, you guys being here and us guys being outside, this is your test and that's our test. It's as simple as that. Your test is happening here and our test is happening there. It's all fancy in terms of we're outside and we're this and you're inside and you're this. But the reality is your test is still going and our test is still going. And so you might be at university, you might be at work, whatever blessings Allah has given you, He's going to test you in that. And so Yusuf alayhi salam was given hikmah and ilm. Allah immediately tests him in that in the next verse. And so it's as though Allah is saying that I've given you a blessing. It's now my turn to test you. And so in these 3 verses, there's a huge shift in the story of Yusuf. Right? Verse 21, the verses prior, right? I'm indicating to them. Yusuf alayhi salam comes into the home. As soon as he comes into this home of the minister, the husband, the minister, tells his wife, take care of him. Verse 22 shows us his maturity. And he's grown up now, he's been blessed with wisdom and knowledge. Verse 23, which is the one we're looking at for our kind of social media discussions, or kind of our interactions. And by the way, when we say social media, there's 2 elements that we struggle with on social media. I'll be frank. We struggle with time wasting and we struggle with the opposite gender. I don't think there's another test on social media. Is there? Other than these 2, is there somebody else struggling with another test on social media? Huh? Which one? Okay. Interesting. So basically, who you can take knowledge from, who you can't take knowledge from. Yeah, so that's a completely different discussion. I'm going to have a go at you for taking it from TikTok in a second. But we'll come to that. And again, these are things that need to be discussed. But keep that in the back of your head. We're going to come to that. So that's important. So, verse 23, which we're looking at today, Allah goes directly into the incident. He doesn't hesitate. He goes straight into it. وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. The translation. The lady whose house Yusuf was living in tried to seduce him. Let's start with a few key discussions on this. The first word used is rawada. Often it's translated as she seduced him. But the literal translation of this word is to come and go. When somebody comes and goes, that's the word used for rawada. And you keep coming and going again and again and again. So for example, if you are seen at a train station every single day, 5 days a week, you are doing rawada. You're coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. And Lane's lexicon, which is for the Arabic students who might use handswear, stop using handswear, use Lane's lexicon. It's probably the best translation for classical works in English. That dictionary pushes the idea that it's when somebody is restless or unsettled. They want something, they desire something, they are seeking after something. Now in Arabic, when a word falls on this pattern of fa'ala, listen to this, rawada, fa'ala, it's the same pattern. So Arabic students would know that this comes in the jahada family. Jahada yujahidu jihadan wa mujahadatan. And it's something that occurs often. And that's what this family means. Jahada means something that happens a lot, right? And so, jahada, nasara, etc., etc. So rawada, this word rawada, and again I'm trying to present to you and unpack the depth within the Quran. It's a story, and stories are descriptive, and Allah's words are very descriptive here. And so Allah is saying that this wasn't an overnight matter. Rawada, when she's trying to seduce, it wasn't just she wakes up one morning and she turns up and like, hey, let's go. No, it doesn't work like that. Rawada, Allah's teaching us, learn the psychology of how illicit relationships occur. It's rawada. It's gradual. It's over time. It's non-stop. It's just there again and again and again and again until it eventually reaches a certain point. And so she's been seeking Yusuf for a long time now. And she's been coming and going, trying in different ways, trying this way, trying that way. And it's been something that's on her mind. Allah is explicit with the wording. And again, because just as He wanted to know that the sin of murder and kidnapping, these brothers of Yusuf, they ended up kidnapping him and throwing him into a well and all. That didn't happen overnight either. But we're not looking at jealousy in some of those discussions right now, right? Similarly, the acts of immorality and the acts of a sexual nature, they don't occur overnight either. It's a gradual process. It starts as friends, it starts as classmates, co-workers, and then human nature is such that it grows and develops into something more than that. And actually the word rawada seems to hold some very interesting connotations. It's a word used when you will do no matter what it takes to achieve your goal. So whether by deceit, whether by force, it doesn't matter. And it's showing us that rawada, this, when you have desires, sometimes your desires will push you to a stage you're willing to ruin any blessings Allah has given you. You're in this perfect marriage, and I often say to youngsters as well, that learn this 80-20 principle, that in life, you will be in a marriage which will give you 80% of what you want, and you will see 20% somewhere else. Don't go for the 20% and lose the 80%. Always remind yourself of that principle. Always. It looks good, it's exciting, it's this, but that's the 20%. Now, why is it exciting? Because you're willing to put effort over there. Listen to this carefully. The grass is not greener on the other side. Where's the grass greener? Where you water it. The grass is greener where you water it. If you're going to put all your effort into that 20% and you're going to make that exciting, then that is going to be exciting. The grass is not greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. If you're putting an effort into your relationship and you're spicing things up the way you should be doing, then you won't need to look elsewhere. And so this is fundamental, and these are understandings that we're getting from the Quran. That is showing us that rawada is where you're willing to do whatever it takes to achieve your goal. She's willing to ruin her own marriage. She's willing to take that risk. And partly coming on to that social media discussion, is social media will lead to these things. And it is that first stepping stone. And when a person engages in that, you are willing to drag down everything that you have in your life for 20%. For 20%. And if you break your whole 80%, that 20% will disappear eventually as well. And so she's willing to do whatever it takes. And another thing about the word jahada, the pattern of jahada, is one person is playing offensive and one person is playing defensive. So for example, on this pattern of jahada, there is the Arabic word qatala. Qatala yuqatilu muqatala, which is where you're fighting somebody. In a fight, there is somebody offensive and there is somebody defensive. And that can switch halfway through and it can carry on and it can change and fluctuate, but there will be somebody offensive and somebody defensive. Right? And so Allah over here is trying to present here that there is opposition. It's not like they're both trying to achieve the same goal. She is trying to achieve something and Yusuf alayhi salam is trying to resist, avoid and kind of, make his kind of exit from these advances. And so Allah has made it clear that from Yusuf alayhi salam's side it's non-consensual. Just by using the word rawada, without us knowing anything, Allah's told us it's non-consensual from Yusuf alayhi salam's perspective. He's not interested. He's not willing to engage. He's not reciprocating. And like I said, Lane's lexicon, the dictionary, mentions that Yusuf was displaying disdainful incompliance. Disdainful incompliance. He's unwilling to comply and his disdain is like, unwilling. So, just from this one word, we learn that she's trying to reel him in different ways, using different techniques. And we understand that the meaning of the word rawada is also to slowly reel somebody in. But that's not the phrase. The phrase is وَرَاوَدَتْهُ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. She attempted to pull away from his nafs, his being. Now some scholars of exegesis and tafsir, they kind of look at this. And by the way, it was mentioned in the tafsir today. That's kind of why it's so relevant to us. And some scholars of tafsir say, she attempted to pull away his innocence and his chastity. And that's the kind of phraseology used in the Quran to give us the imagery to allow us to understand exactly what's being referred to. She wants to own his soul. Because as explicit as that might be, Allah has used this language in the Quran. Allah is saying she wanted to seduce him and take control of his soul. Now, that's interesting because she's already the owner of Yusuf, right? From a perspective of she is the owner and Yusuf is the slave, alayhi salam, she's already the owner. But Yusuf alayhi salam is already her property as such from a slavery perspective. So what's left? She wants Yusuf to desire her as much as she desires Yusuf. That's what she wants. And so the Quran is so powerful, she wanted to strip Yusuf of his own identity and she wanted the innermost part of Yusuf for herself. Now what's led to this stage? Well, some of these indications have been indicated. How does Allah describe her? Allah could have mentioned her name. Allah could have specifically referred to her as He's referred to other people previously with their names. Or Allah could have referred to, as the wife of the politician. And He's referred to as that. But here Allah actually doesn't even call her the wife of the politician or this or that. When Allah actually refers to her in this sentence, He says, وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا. The one who was the one whose house Yusuf alayhi salam was in. That's interesting. Allah here strips her of the title of wife. He doesn't refer to her as a wife. And it seems that Allah is indicating that her actions are going to be so grave and dire that it is a disservice to the word wife. And Allah is teaching us that there are times in our lives, our actions remove from us certain qualities that we should have. The name of a husband, the title of father, the title of mother, the title of Muslim, these things, these titles are titles with requisites. And if you don't fulfill those requisites, you're not deserving of that title anymore. Understand that. If I'm a teacher and I'm no longer teaching, Asad, is that you? Is that Asad Waqas? No. Asif. We were in Jamaat together, right? SubhanAllah. This was how many years ago? 10 years ago. Have I seen you since? SubhanAllah. Wow. MashaAllah. 10 years ago. Was it Wales? Yeah, MashaAllah. SubhanAllah. Khair. Sorry about that. Khair. You had a Vauxhall back then? Yeah? Okay. Still or no? Okay, alhamdulillah, progress. So khair. Sorry, I've just baited some guy out on the internet. So yeah. National insurance? No, I'm joking. So, Allah could have mentioned the name, Allah doesn't mention the name. Allah actually strips her of the title of wife. And it's because it's going to be such a disservice that she kind of commits. And so Allah deliberately refers to her as the woman whose house Yusuf was in, which seems to indicate that the politician is rarely at home. Listen to this, listen to the depth. The scholars of Tafsir, Imam Razi indicates to this, that it's the house that the house of the individual Yusuf alayhi salam was in. The attribution of the house isn't made to the politician. The attribution of the house is made to her. It's saying that she's the one who's always in the house. She's always in the house, which is an indication that there may be some form of neglect here. From an emotional perspective, from a love perspective, somebody to spend time with. And on top of that, she's in charge of the affairs and the matters of the home. So in essence, it's an indication that Yusuf is crossing paths with her alayhi salam on a daily basis. And so she's been struggling with herself for some time. Now think about this. When somebody's rights are not fulfilled, it leads to certain sins. As fathers, if you don't fulfill certain rights for your children, for your son, for your daughter, you don't give them that attention, because believe it or not, you'll be really surprised to hear this, we as humans are attention seeking. Yeah, as shocking as that is, of course we are. We're all attention seeking. We want some form of attention. That's why we dress in a certain way. That's why we look in the mirror and see we're looking in a certain way. We desire attention. Whether from the opposite gender, whether from friends, whether from this, we buy certain shoes, not because we feel good. Even if we feel uncomfortable, we'll wear those shoes because it looks good. I mean, we'll leave the tag on as well now. There's those shoes that you get those tags on and stuff like that. And we'll leave them on because that's the style, that's the fashion. It looks strange maybe to somebody, but I'll do it. Why? Because it's the thing. Allah's teaching us when you don't fulfill the rights of somebody in a relationship, whether it's a student-teacher relationship, whether it's a parent-child relationship, there's going to be flaws and problems that come in which will impact that individual. And if you've heard the phrase, we won't use that phrase, but there's a lot of kind of psychology behind this. And so Allah is indicating that she herself, and by the way, we need to understand, she's not an entirely evil woman. She does repent later on in the story. Allah gives her the tawfiq to repent. And she repents and makes up for it in a beautiful way. She does redeem herself. So we can't study her from the perspective that she's an evil, malicious woman with impure intentions and that's it. But she's a normal woman with normal desires. And remember, you do not study the story of Yusuf from the perspective of Yusuf alayhi salam. Listen to this. Yeah? We have this mindset of I want to be the protagonist in this anime movie, right? That's not how it works. Allah's giving you different characters. You have to become each of those characters. When the brothers are throwing Yusuf down the well, you've got to become the brothers and see, do I have that capability? Actually, I think I do. And I discussed that when at those stages. Over here, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the woman, not Yusuf alayhi salam. And you have to ask yourself that if I was in this scenario, if I was in this circumstance, Have I been in this circumstance? Have I been in a circumstance where I desire something impermissible for me and I am now pursuing it? No matter what happens, I'm going to pursue it. I will break whatever comes in my way, marriage, this, that, I am going to pursue this. She's a normal woman with desires. And Allah wants us to relate to this individual, because I keep mentioning, the stories of the prophets are not just stories of the prophets of entertainment, they are archetypes, character study, development, that we follow and we understand that I need to bring these into my life. And so she's become obsessed with Yusuf, right? And what we're learning is when some rights, and like I mentioned, are not fulfilled in any relationship, in any marriage, this can lead a person down to that which is unhealthy. When a young girl is born into a house and she's not given the required attention, she will seek that attention somewhere else. That guy who sends her a message, that's attention. I like that. She's probably not even interested in sinning, but it's just the attention. And the guy who receives a message, who gets the DM, etc., he's getting some level of attention, he's getting some level of interest, he's getting that acknowledgement in this regard. He's going to get excited. And so he'll go down that route as well. We have to understand that when certain things are not fulfilled in a proper manner, and we leave a vacuum, something comes and fills that up. It's only when you have empty space that something fills up. Right? If this masjid is full of musallis and everyone's full, you can't fit another guy in. As soon as one guy walks out after Isha or something like this, then quickly a guy will come in for Taraweeh and it fills a gap in. If we don't allow that space to be occupied with something else, because it's occupied already, then none of these other things come in. When a marriage is going perfectly well and a person is working on that marriage, and it won't always be perfectly well, but you're working on it, or you're working on yourself, or you're working on this, or you're working on that, and you're filling in with halal avenues, you won't need to fill it with haram avenues. Why have you never felt the need to go and eat something haram? Generally speaking, for the vast majority, why do we not feel the need? Because we fill that void with something halal, with something permissible. And so it's a very kind of common sense idea. And so, we understand this very clearly, that shaitan will turn up and he'll use exactly the same tactics he used with the brothers of Yusuf. It's gradual. Dad loves him more, dad's this, dad's that, dad's this. Why is Yusuf like this? And he will lead them down this path. Same with this, it's gradual. You're just messaging a work colleague, you're discussing college stuff, it's my project I need to submit, I'm just scrolling on social media, I'm not doing anything wrong, but every bit of that is intoxicating the mind. And we'll come on to some discussions in that regard, inshallah, specifically. But we know the truth and we can't deceive ourselves. And I mentioned it, was it last year that we did the social media one? I was terrorizing that guy who he got terrorized so much he didn't come back. Who was it? Huh? Say again? Ibi. Yeah, Bichara. He probably avoided this lecture on purpose. So, khair. And so, we know exactly what it is. I mentioned in that lecture as well, that extra smiley face or that extra lol or these kind of things that we use in our kind of chats and our messages, etc. That's us basically trying to prolong that conversation into sin. And we don't need somebody else to tell us about this. So Allah mentions, بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَاذِيرًا. Not Surah Yusuf, but Allah mentions in another place that you know yourself better than anybody else. بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَاذِيرًا. Even when you start presenting excuses, you know those are just excuses. Those are just excuses. It's just a work colleague. It's just that. You know exactly what's going on. And so this extends, by the way, beyond sexual relationships and all of these kind of things as well. But khair, we don't want to get into too much detail. Now, I'm not saying, listen carefully, I'm not saying that if you have been neglected, then this opens the door for sin. No. This is where we look at Yusuf. If somebody says that by what you're saying, if a person has faced neglect and they haven't received that attention and care, then that's a justification and excuse for them, then I will say what? Then let's look at Yusuf. Let's look at Yusuf alayhi salam. Somebody who's been through every difficulty and he's been through absolutely everything. He's been through the worst traumatic experiences. You could say anybody who's faced neglect from the prophets, it's probably going to be Yusuf alayhi salam in the way he was treated by his brothers, kind of kicked out of his home by his own brothers, and this whole process that took place through the slave trade and this and that and that. If anybody's going to be traumatized as a child, it's Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam. But nothing justifies the disobedience to Allah. He knew that there's no justification. There's no justification. I need to find a solution. I need to find a solution. That's it. Yusuf alayhi salam is going to find his solution. Allah is showing us again that when emotions and desires go unchecked, it leads to major sins. And we've seen this with the brothers. When their emotions they went unchecked, they got jealousy, they went into abduction, kidnapping, murder, etc. And it can be anything. It can be anything with any sin. And so, وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ, she locked a bunch of doors. Abwab is actually the plural. Now, غَلَّقَ, I'm going to mention a few things. غَلَّقَ is on the فَعَلَ pattern. فَعَلَ, غَلَّقَ, عَلَّمَ family, for those who know عَلَّمَ يُعَلِّمُ تَعْلِيمًا. And so, what does عَلَّمَ mean? It means to meticulously do something, to do something very carefully with serious planning. غَلَّقَ means that she locked the doors very carefully with very precise thought. So the timing of when she locked it, she'll have thought about it. When my husband is out, and I know he's not coming back for a while, that's when I'll lock the door. Where Yusuf alayhi salam, where he would have been. All of these things she would have taken into consideration. Not only locking, but making sure only she had access to the keys. This is not an in-the-moment thing. This is coordinated. Our sins are coordinated. The sooner I understand this, the better. I'm telling you, we can see the trajectory of our sins and where it's going. We won't let ourselves see it, but ask yourself, every communication you are making, what is the end goal of this? What is the end goal? What do I want from this? Is it I want to go to the end of to kind of go all the way deep down and engage in that sin? Or am I going to stop it here? Or am I going to stop it here? Or am I going to stop it here? So what am I wasting my time for? What am I wasting my time for? I need to understand that everything has its consequences. And over here, she's done this very serious planning. And she's thought about it. And so there's multiple doors, by the way. There's the main door of the house. There's maybe a door to the corridor. There's a door to the room, etc. So she's locked all of them. And we get that from abwab, lots of doors. She locks a bunch of doors and she says, وَقَالَتْ هَيْتَ لَكَ. Now again, let me ask you a question. You know, when we talk about social media and we say that a person got involved in a sin, the sin which happens, the kind of, if we're talking about the big sin that takes place at the end of the road, that only happens when I allowed a number of steps to take place. So Allah is teaching us here that there are things that you need to do in that scenario beforehand. It doesn't start, and this is the verse of the Quran, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. Don't even go near zina. Don't even come close to it. And Allah is teaching us that it's because it will reach a stage where you can't pull yourself out of that circumstance. You need to close those doors and avenues which lead you to sin, which brings us onto social media. If it's social media that is taking me down this route and taking me towards these sins, I need to cut that off. Listen, if you want to hear some crazy thing that I'm going to tell you today, which is going to change your life, and in terms of how to kind of navigate social media, there isn't. I'm sorry, I don't have it. If you're sat here with this sincere intention, Allah, I'm learning from your book that you really care for me, and I'm learning that there are things in my life that will destroy my life, and that will absolutely ruin my life, and that will tear my soul apart, and that will corrupt my fitrah and my natural disposition, and that will lead me to your disobedience, upon disobedience, upon disobedience, and me realizing that me fulfilling that desire once will not get rid of the desire, but it's actually planting and rooting that desire deeper into my soul, that I want it more, and I want it more, and I want it more. If I realize that, I will sit here thinking, I need to do something about it. And if there's something I need to do about it, that the first thing I need to do is do an analysis. What streams of social media are taking me away from Allah? I need to start cutting them off. There's no fancy solution. I'm telling you now. You know the word taqwa? We have all of these fancy discussions on taqwa. Every Jum'ah you'll hear, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu ittaqullah wa qulu Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu ittaqu qawlan sadida yuslih lakum. All the verses that you hear on taqwa. What does taqwa mean? And I with my students, I always do this. I'll say, define taqwa. And it's embarrassing because the majority of us don't know the meaning of taqwa. We'll say the fear of Allah, we'll say this or that. What does it actually mean? What is taqwa? I'll explain to you what taqwa is. Pay attention. Taqwa comes from the word wiqaya. Waqayaqi, wiqaya, Arabic. Wiqaya is a shield. If I have 10 shields in this beautiful mihrab, 10 shields, and somebody comes to attack me with a sword and I say, yo, I've got 10 shields, I'm okay. No, that's not how it works. You're going to have to pick one of them up and place it in front of you. That's wiqaya. That's waqayaqi wiqaya. That's what taqwa is. Taqwa is not some abstract idea that I have this within me, the fear of Allah or the consciousness of Allah, this and that. Taqwa literally means do something. That's what taqwa means. It means take some physical steps to do something in your life. The second you do something, the doors of this religion is based on doing something. Understand this. This religion is based on doing something. Look, as you can think about it from any perspective you want. For the thing that just came into my mind from this perspective is Umar radiallahu anhu, when he established the Islamic calendar, the Hijrah date, he could have set it as the date the Prophet ﷺ was born. He could have set it on the date the Prophet ﷺ passed away. He could have set it on any date. He set it on the migration date. When the Prophet ﷺ, for those who haven't studied the seerah to the extent that they would want to, I'll give you a quick summary. The Prophet ﷺ is born. At the age of 40, he receives prophethood. For 10 years, he's in Makkah Mukarramah. And then for 13 years, he's in Medina Munawwara. And he passes away. So 40 years old, prophethood. 10 years in Makkah. And 13 years in Medina Munawwara. And it's 23 years as a prophet. So the Prophet ﷺ, when is the Hijrah date that we know today? 1444. It starts from after the Prophet ﷺ's first 10 years, he made migration to Medina. That's when the Islamic date starts. And Umar radiallahu anhu fixed it as that. Why? Because this religion is based on action. The Prophet ﷺ took an action to go to Medina Munawwara, and Umar radiallahu anhu wanted us to know we don't base our Islamic date on somebody's death or somebody's birth or this or that, on something which is from Allah. We base it on something which is action. I have to do something. The entirety of this religion. Find all the ahadith that talk about Allah coming and interacting with me. If I go one step closer, Allah will come this many steps. If I go walking, Allah will come running. Where does it say just if you make an intention? Your intention will get you reward. But when a person is of taqwa and a person of taqwa, it's not like your turban is touching the ceiling and you're walking and floating and gliding and all of these kind of things. That's not what taqwa is. Taqwa could be the most sinful person, engaged in the worst of sins, who decides to pull his mobile out right now and say, I'm deleting this app. That's taqwa. You are a person of taqwa. And everything that's mentioned about taqwa, you now have it. Allah will give you everything that is applied to the person of taqwa because you took a practical step. And you moving to Allah, Allah moves to you. It's as simple as that. And so now we understand that concept of taqwa, wiqaya. It's you have to practically do something. And when it comes to social media, it's exactly that. That there is no fix or solution that, inshallah, I'm going to change today. I'm not going to look at this. I'm not going to do that. And then I'm just scrolling. It's going to come. But why don't I take practical steps? What do I need to do physically? What is it that I'm struggling with? Now, for some people, it's not realistic to say, get rid of the social media. For some reason, and there's a hadith on this which I find beautiful. It's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where the companions, and if you kind of want, because we said social media in it, so let's talk about that. The Prophet ﷺ said to the companions, the Sahaba, they used to do this, right? When they would finish like from Salah and stuff like that, they would go and they would kind of stand. You know where the road junction is? They would kind of stand there and talk. And we do this as well. When you're walking home with your boys and this guy's going to go that way and this guy's going to go that way, so you'll stand there, you'll kind of put a checkpoint and you'll speak there for about half an hour. And then after you finish speaking for half an hour, you'll kind of part ways. Right? And then if there's another group, then you'll stop somewhere else and then you'll stop at that junction for a while. So the Sahaba would do exactly this. Some of you smiling, it means that you do this all the time. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhum would do this. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to them that you need to stop doing it. You need to stop doing it. It's not good. And obviously it's a number of reasons. The Prophet ﷺ said you need to stop doing it. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum said, but O Prophet of Allah, we have to. This is where we talk with the boys, this is where we chill. There's no way we cannot do this. So the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, if you really must, there's some principles. I'll present this to you in the 21st century. You need to take your mobile phones, all of you, and throw them in the bin. And the first response we'll get is, but come on, this is a bit backwards. We're not going to do that. We need our own phones. We need them for work. We need them for social media. We need them for this. Fine. If you really must use them, there are certain conditions. And the Prophet ﷺ, what was the conditions he said to the Sahaba? Condition number one. And so he mentions a number of conditions. I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. Condition number one that the Prophet ﷺ mentions was, what was it? Shall I just find the hadith quickly? Have you got it? Oh, okay. If somebody does get it before me, then please do shout it out. Yes, he found it. So the first thing he said was غض البصر. Lower your gaze. He's going to shout them out one by one. So غض البصر. Lower the gaze. Social media. If you're going to go on social media, lower the gaze. But I am lowering the gaze, isn't it? I'm looking down. That's not what lower the gaze means, though, is it? Seriously, غض البصر. I have to make sure that nothing comes in my way which is going to make it difficult for me. The Prophet, like Ajib, when you think about it, how perfect was the words of the Prophet ﷺ. And he did the first thing we struggle with on social media, and the beauty of the Sahaba as well, they were realistic as well. The Prophet ﷺ says, but it's so crazy because when it came to alcohol, not one of them said, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, we have to drink alcohol." They got rid of it. They got rid of it. They could have said, "Prophet of Allah, alcohol is something we've been drinking since we were born. It's in our genetics. All our family have been drinking it." The Prophet ﷺ get rid of it, got rid of it. But something like this, which is pertinent to me and you, where even the most, like if I say to you, don't drink alcohol, it's a very realistic thing. If I say to you, no Wi-Fi, astaghfirullah, qiyamah has come. So, but the Sahaba had the same understanding as us. They were the same people as us. Their context was different, their situations were different. It was the same thing. It was, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, this is fine. If you are going to be on those corners." Now it gives you an understanding. Why was the Prophet ﷺ saying, don't stand on those corners? Those corners, those junctions that they used to stand on would lead to majority of their sins. It would lead to sins. And so the Prophet ﷺ was saying, close the door to those sins. However, if you really must, then let me tell you what sins you're going to come across on social media. غض البصر. That's the number one thing we struggle with on social media. And the Prophet ﷺ hits the nail on the head. Now, does he say, this is how you do it? No, you need to take those steps. Allah will make it easier for you. Listen to this carefully. مَنْ تَرَكَ شَيْئًا لِلَّهِ عَوَّضَهُ اللَّهُ خَيْرًا مِّنْهِ. Somebody who leaves something for the sake of Allah, Allah promises to give you better. You're going to sacrifice something for Allah, Allah will give you something better. You knowing that my Allah is watching and He loves me and He wants me to control my gaze, I am not going to look at this as much as it tears at myself and I want to look at this and it's the hardest thing for me not to look at. Allah, nobody understands but you. Allah, I'll do it for you. غض البصر. I have to do it. It's not an option. When it comes to social media, I need to start cleansing those things that are causing the opposite of غض البصر. Next part of the hadith. كف الأذى. كف الأذى. So, or is it كف الأذى? كف الأذى. So, sorry, you said it right and then I confused you. كف الأذى. كف الأذى means to, كف الأذى means any harm or any kind of, what's the third one? Okay, so then كف الأذى. كف الأذى is cyberbullying. When it comes to social media, كف الأذى. Adha means difficulty, adha means pain, adha means, kind of annoying somebody or frustrating somebody, trolling somebody. Kaful adha. Don't troll people. What do we use social media for? This guy got ratioed, and this guy this, and this guy that. Trolling people. But it gets worse than that, innit? On our WhatsApp groups, we'll kind of make a comment and terrorize somebody just to harm them. Now, there's banter, there's jokes, right? There's nothing wrong with banter. So long as everybody knows it's banter, so long as everybody knows it's a joke, that's fine. Oh, subhanallah. He's walked in. Did you come from home? Okay, inshallah. Are you married? Respite for her. So, it's okay, we'll babysit, don't worry. So, kaful adha, cyberbullying. That's exactly what it is. So, that's the fundamental thing. That, don't do stuff that hurts somebody. When they're walking on that route and they're walking on that path and etc., don't hurt people, don't annoy people, don't offend people. Same thing on social media. The third? Raddus salam. Give salam. Now remember, Raddus salam is deeper than just assalamu alaikum. So if somebody messaged you assalamu alaikum, I said wa alaikum salam on WhatsApp, that's good enough. No. Raddus salam means this. What is salam in and of itself? Salam is this idea of peace. And I was saying to the guys at the prison today that you guys in prison should be walking around and every time you walk past a Muslim, you should be saying Assalamu alaikum. And that should be your thing. There shouldn't be a tribal thing or this thing or gang thing. This is a Muslim identity, Assalamu alaikum. And Assalamu alaikum means I want peace for you. Which means that how can I harbor hatred for you in my heart and on my tongue is salam. That's hypocritical. How can I be hypocritical? It's meaning you want the best for every single person you interact with. On social media, the people you're interacting with, you want the best for them. The people, when you give salam to somebody, I want the best for you. It's not a case of salamu alaikum, and behind that I have some ulterior motive. So, raddu salam. And raddu salam means to respond to somebody's salam, where the scholars mention, make yourself such a person that people can even say salam to you. Your interactions on social media should be approachable, that somebody is able to approach you. The right approachable, yeah? Not the other approachable. Khair. Go on. وَالْأَمْرُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالنَّهْيِ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. That's the end of the hadith, right? وَالْأَمْرُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالنَّهْيِ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. Advice to good, forbid from evil. And this is basically using your social media for the objective of our existence. To call people to Allah, to call people to good. And if you're calling, by the way, if you're calling other people to good, what are the chances of you doing that good? If I'm saying to this guy, yo, come to salah, the chances of me going to that same salah is going to be very high. And if I'm saying, let's not do this sin today, and the chances of me not doing that sin is going to be pretty high as well, because how can I be the guy saying don't do this and I'm the guy then doing it? And so the amr bil ma'roof and nahy al munkar is really interesting. There's a number of ways you can look at it, but one of the ways I look at it is just don't be a yes man. Don't be a yes man. Whatever happens, yeah, let's do this. Yeah. When it comes to like deciding where to eat, no problem, be a yes man, right? That's fine. But when it comes to something like sin, don't be a yes man like, yeah, I'm going to do it. Amr bil ma'roof, nahy al munkar. Have your own personality. Be your own person. Be your own man. And for the sisters, be your own woman. And be somebody who says, I'm not doing this. Amr bil ma'roof, nahy al munkar. Amr bil ma'roof, nahy al munkar is more about you and you as an individual, as opposed to what you're doing with somebody else. That's you setting boundaries and guidelines for yourself. So khair, anyway, so we're talking social media. Hopefully that covers some of those principles. But the key thing I mentioned inside the social media discussions was this very, very important idea of taqwa. You're going to have to do something. And there is no talk that anybody can give you sitting here which is going to make you make a change unless you make that change. I have to do something about it. I have to do something about it. And that's a personal thing. That's a me problem if I don't do it. Do you understand? And so that's very, very important. Now she says, hay talak. She says to Yusuf alayhi salam, hay talak. Now, what does this word mean? So, hay talak in Arabic can mean, and we'll conclude on these discussions as soon as this verse finishes, which is just a few more comments, inshallah. Hay talak means, one of the meanings of this is, tahayyatu laka. I have prepared myself for you. And the second meaning is, ta'al wa asri'. Quickly, get over here. Hay talak, hurry, get here. So it could be one of those things. I have prepared myself for you, or get over here. Now subhanAllah, the phrase in Arabic, it uses extremely soft letters. Hay talak. The Arabic language has this, kind of very powerful ability. And to be honest, you see this in all sorts of languages as well. You see this in English as well. Where certain words, they have that kind of intrinsic resonant sound. So for example, spooky, the word spooky, for example, sounds spooky. Right? And it's strange, I don't know how to explain it, but it sounds spooky. And if you take any word, it just sounds like, it just works, Allahu A'lam. So like the word ugly, it just sounds ugly. And the word beautiful just sounds beautiful. Like, I don't know how that makes sense. It's partially probably to do with our kind of thing, like our conditioning of it and our ontology with these letters and words. However, there is an idea in terms of the softness of the words as well. And certain letters or softer letters which give off softer meanings, right? So the word hard is hard and the word soft is soft. So, hay talak. Hay talak is very soft letters, and it's her kind of using soft letters for something which is terrible. It's the beautification of something so ugly and evil that it can destroy a marriage at an atomistic level, on a personal level, and it can destroy societies at a communal level. And this is very, very important to understand. That she feels that if I hurry him, and if I tell him to be quick, he'll probably fall for his desires. Is that not what shaitan does? When I'm engaging in a sin, it's like, don't think, get on with it. You have to stop and think, you have to pause and think, what am I doing? If you have to take consultation and ask a friend and say, I'm struggling with this, you've got to bring somebody into that circle, into that moment and say, I'm really struggling with this. But the second you let shaitan just say, just go ahead with it, don't worry about it, think about the consequences later, you're going to put yourself into a lot of trouble. And so that's why Allah teaches us this concept. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. Don't put yourself in a position where those animalistic desires come in and now it's too far, you're too far gone. And so when Yusuf hears this, he's smart. And he knows exactly what she's saying, and he instantly panics and reacts. He says, Ma'ad Allah. Now Allah is now going to teach us the response of the Prophet. You might be in this kind of scenario or circumstance in your life. This is your response, the prophetic response. Ma'ad Allah. He says Allah's protection. The students of Arabic know Ma'ad Allah is mudaf mudaf ilayh. Mudaf mudaf ilayh is a fragment. It's an incomplete sentence. What he has said is an incomplete sentence. If I say, I seek Allah's protection, that's complete. If I say Ma'ad Allah, I'm just saying Allah's protection. What about it? Allah's protection is here. Allah's protection is amazing. Allah's protection is what? Allah's protection. It's idafa. It's not even a complete sentence. It's as though he's in such shock in this moment. He's struggling to produce a complete sentence. He's so scared of the situation that he's in because he realizes the severity of this situation and what's going to happen. Ma'ad Allah. What am I doing? Ma'ad Allah. Allah's protection. Allah's protection. And so he's given himself a framework. When you are in that situation, it will be this phrase, Ma'ad Allah, knowing what it means. And some argue that he was scared of the displeasure of the minister, the politician. Some say he's referring to Allah. The word ma'adha, which we use when we read A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, A'udhu is where the word ma'adha comes from. And the word a'adha, or a'adhat, is the word that's used. It's when you cling on to something. So a'adhat biwaladiha, when a mother hangs on to the child. And when a camel fears for its young one, the young kind of camel, the word is used as a'adhat, when the camel will protect it. And a'adha bil-'azm is when a piece of flesh clings to the bone, it hangs on to the bone. And so ma'adh Allah means I am clinging to the protection of Allah. I'm hanging on to it with every iota of strength that I have. Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathwai. He is my master. Ahsana mathwai. He gave me such a beautiful accommodation. Now, understand. This is Yusuf alayhi salam teaching us principle number 2. First thing, ma'adh Allah, remember Allah. Second thing, remember the blessings of Allah upon you. Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathwai. Now some say he's referring to the master of the home. And some say he's referring to Rabbi as Allah. Either way, remember the blessings of Allah. What has Allah not given me? If you are inclined towards a sin and you have a partner, remember that blessing. Think of the alternative to this sin that Allah has given you, the halal alternative, and innahu Rabbi ahsana mathwai. He's given me this and this and this. I am seeking after this. But I have somebody at home who does this, who does this. Or for the woman, she should be thinking, I have a husband who does this and who does this. Yeah, I don't like the way he chooses food, but everything else I love about him. He does this and he does that and he does this and he does that. And that's something amazing. Think of the blessings and the halal alternatives Allah has given you. And scholars mention that, we'll leave that out, it's detailed. And the final thing he mentions, إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. No doubt the people who do wrong will never achieve what they want. Listen, I have to remind, one of the most powerful things about becoming Hafidh, what time is it? How long are we going for, by the way? 12:01. Are we concluding soon? Questions soon? Yeah, okay, we'll do questions soon, inshallah. So, إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. The people who do wrong will never achieve what they want. That's what it means. Yuflihu, aflaha yuflihu means not just success. Because the word aflaha is when, listen to this. Aflaha is used for the farmer who rips open the earth and he plants a seed inside and he waits for something good to happen. We're reminding ourselves that just as the farmer plants a seed in the ground and waits for something good to happen, you planting the seed of sin won't give you what you want. You are seeking, pay attention to this, I am seeking certain something from this sin. I'm not getting it from this sin. I promise you, you won't get it from that sin. Yusuf alayhi salam says, إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. That pleasure and that joy that you're seeking, you will not get it from this sin. You might experience some excitement, you might experience a buzz, but I promise you the consequences of that and the ramifications of that are life altering and life changing. And they will ruin your life. إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. You're not going to get what you're seeking after. That's what he says. Now, this is really interesting. Because Yusuf alayhi salam, in all of this, I'm going to read it again in a second and I'm going to translate it again for you. He's not even talking to her. He says, Ma'adallah, the protection of Allah. The next thing he says is, Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathwai. It is my Lord. And Innahu, it is him, my Lord, ahsana mathwai. He gave me such a beautiful residence. Innahu la yuflihu al-zalimun. 100%, I know this as a fact. La yuflihu al-zalimun. The wrongdoer will never achieve their end goal. He doesn't even speak to her. He doesn't even address her. When you are faced in a situation where somebody is trying to engage you, that's not the time for you to message back and say, you know, Islam doesn't allow this. Block and move on. Don't even engage. Yusuf alayhi salam is teaching us, I'm not even engaging with her. I'm engaging with my nafs. Forget trying to explain to this person in this moment. I don't even have trust on myself. Every phrase that he said here, he doesn't even give her an iota of attention. And this is fundamental in avoiding the sin of temptation. Don't respond. Look, you're like a friend to me, sister. You're like a brother to me. You know, it's like, I don't see you in that way. You know, I just see you as like a family member and this and that. You don't need to get into all of this. Say, you know, if I was in a different scenario, I would have married you 100 times over. And, you don't want to get carried away. But khair. وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. And so that concludes these verses, inshallah. Now there's more to it, but I'm going to pause it there. You know, that was just that set of verses. And I wanted to kind of do a deeper study. I've been kind of studying Surah Yusuf since the 17th of September 2021. In detail, we've been going through verse by verse. We've not finished it yet. We're still going through it. As you can see, this was one verse that we looked through. And so in this kind of detail with the, in London, we're kind of going through in a very, very detailed manner, trying to assess each of the words, each of the letters, the psychology behind it, and a number of tafsirs, etc. And so Allah give us tawfiq to complete the study, and inshallah, we want to kind of make it into something more, and etc., etc., not a movie or something, but you know, وراودته التي, so the verse itself, وراودته التي هو في بيتها عن نفسي وغلقت الأبواب, she shuts the doors وقالت هيت لك قال معاذ الله إنه ربي أحسن مثواي إنه لا يفلح الظالمون. Now the next verse, there's a bit more mentioned, which is possibly useful for this conversation as well, but we're not going to do it right now, inshallah. We can do it some other time. But Allah indicates, وَلَكَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ, Yusuf alayhi salam, according to some interpretations of this verse, he actually had inclinations for her. He actually had inclinations for her. He didn't engage in those inclinations. He's a human. It's natural to have those inclinations, and I think that makes it much more powerful as a reading, that he actually had inclinations for her. He's living in the home with her, but he resisted despite all of that. Okay, and then the next thing that happens is then obviously he runs to the door, and the door flings open. The door flings open. Now there's a verse that's mentioned there that رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ, he saw something. Again, there's discussions in there we don't have the time to get into. But the last thing that I will mention is he ran towards the door, and Allah threw it open. Listen to this carefully. He's a prophet. He can't open doors magically. Listen carefully. He's a prophet, but that still doesn't mean he can open doors magically. He doesn't have some alohomora that he can run through the door like this. That's not how it works. The way he was able to walk through that door is, Yusuf, you did everything you could. You did absolutely everything you could to avoid this situation. Leave the rest to us. We'll do the rest. Allah will bring miracles in your life in those kind of situations. When you're in a situation of sin and you've done everything to get out of it, but now you've been forced in that position, you just need to run towards the door. Allah will do the rest. Every single door flings open, the minister stood there, Allah solved everything. Allah is teaching us that you will have to do certain things, but do not forget, I own this universe. You do your part, leave the rest to me. السعي منا والإتمام من الله. The effort needs to come from you. The end result, the kind of signature at the end, the stamp at the end, I'll take care of that. You don't need to worry about that. You don't need to worry about that. Does that make sense? And so if we don't put ourselves in those situations, Yusuf alayhi salam didn't put himself in any of those situations. He didn't put himself into that. He didn't send a message. He didn't send a text. He didn't do anything. When you find yourself in that situation, you need to find Allah. You need to run to Allah. And Allah will open doors. Does that make sense? So hopefully that kind of covers some of the social media discussions. What else did we say we want to discuss? I'll quickly touch on some of the other topics. What else was there? Liberalism. I think liberalism and a couple of kind of new movements that are coming about. I'll quickly touch on this. You have liberalism, which is kind of including feminism and all of these other ideologies. And then as a response to that, you've now got the red pill movement that's coming about. So kind of, red pill ideology and some of these things. And it's a response to kind of feminism and some of these things. And this will happen, by the way, when feminism goes too far that way, then something else will come to counter that, like red pill. And so both of them will be some sort of an extreme, but they kind of a counterbalance for each of them. And somebody recently asked me in London, what's your position on red pill and this and that? And I said, my position is I ascribe to feminism and modernity and liberalism and all of these things as far as Islam ascribes to them. What does that mean? I'm not interested in the ideology. I'm interested in what does Islam teach? I'll take that. If Islam agrees with this in feminism, you can call it feminism. No, I'm not interested. I'm following Islam. And if Islam agrees with this idea in the red pill movement, no problem. You can call it red pill. I'm following Islam. I ascribe to every other ideology as far as Islam ascribes to it. If I study this religion, now, if you want to learn ideology of the religion, simple, study the Sahaba. I'm being serious. Study the Sahaba. I've started a Sahaba series which I do every evening. After the Taraweeh Salah, it starts about 11:15 because our Taraweeh in London starts at 9. And so we're finished by 10:30 easily. So I do it in the evenings. Obviously, for the next 3-4 days, I wouldn't be doing it because I'm here in Preston. I've got talks, etc. But at the moment, we're going through that, and it's phenomenal. Some of the stuff we're unearthing in the lives of the Sahaba. So really, give yourself the role model of the Sahaba. You want to learn ideology and the mindset and the framework you should have. Because obviously we're listening on podcasts and we're listening here and we're listening on there, trying to get an idea of what's the right mindset and framework. Study the lives of the Sahaba. If I've given you one thing today, it's to show you that the Quran is not a kind of outdated piece of scripture. I've tried to present that the hadith is not an outdated text. It is something relevant, more relevant today than it's ever been. So if you want to learn these ideologies, learn it from the people who understood these ideologies, the Sahaba. Study the lives of the Sahaba. It's not some old thing where people study Hayatus Sahaba. That, oh yeah, they read Hayatus Sahaba. It's like, it's something old. That's the way it should be. That's normal. So if you want to learn ideology and you want to understand liberalism and modernity and all of these things, study the lives of the Sahaba and you will see all of these things shine through. Absolutely. And so then when somebody asks you, what's your opinion on this movement, and what's your opinion on this ideology, and what's your opinion on this? I never say, give me the ideology, I'll say, give me specifics. And when they mention specifics, I'll say, the Sahaba did this, that's what I follow. The Prophet ﷺ did this, that's what I follow. So we're not interested. You can sit there kind of trying to understand the whole ideology, and this is what's such a shame, innit? I'm there spending time studying an entire ideology like the red pill movement, or this movement, or that movement, without even understanding what my Islam is. That's embarrassing. If I'm going to study all these other movements without studying Islam, study Islam and then go study all these other movements, fantastic. Now, remember, I don't have an issue with a lot of things mentioned in the red pill movement. I think some of them are very, very important today. But that's because we don't have the lives of the Sahaba in front of us, that we're having to take it from somebody else. If we took the lives of the Sahaba, we wouldn't have to go to somebody else and say, teach me how to be a man, and teach me how to be a woman, and teach me what a high value man is and a high value woman is, and some of these terms that are being used and thrown around. Khair. So hopefully that covers that in a kind of nutshell. Anything else? What else did we say? I think drugs, right? If somebody wants to know a bit more about drugs, I was traveling from somewhere to somewhere, and on YouTube I was listening to one of the bayans of Sheikh Sunima Mullah. He did a talk on drugs, phenomenal. Possibly one of the best bayans I've listened to on drugs. It's like an hour long or something like that. If somebody's struggling with drugs or something like that, start with that lecture and then come and see somebody, inshallah. But in regard to drugs, I guess one of the things that we've tried to do, I tried to do in London quite early on, is have like a drug clinic or some sort of thing attached. The NHS is actually willing to put a lot of money into drug kind of rehab for Muslims, especially in BAME communities, black and ethnic minorities. And so see if you can get into some of that funding and etc. And you can have somebody kind of coming in on an anonymous basis and seeing if there's something that's needed. We have a large influx of the Somali community there. And I was told by some of the Somali kind of students and stuff that a lot of the adults are engaged in drinking alcohol. I say a lot. Some of the adults in the Somali community are involved in drinking alcohol. And so what you kind of find is within different communities, there'll be access to different drugs. So within the Gujarati community or within the Pakistani community or within the Bengali community, or you might even say the subcontinent might be one. I don't know how the dynamic works at this stage. We're very early on. But these are things that we'll need to tackle as an individual basis. But the thing I would say to you guys is just listen to that lecture on Sheikh Sulaiman Mullah, and he'll give you, for kids especially, listen to that, and you'll want to avoid drugs for the rest of your life. He's involved on the ground with kind of people involved in drugs and stuff like that. It's heartbreaking. The stories that he mentions, the way it's tearing families apart, and mothers and this and that. Like he's saying that he's getting a phone call from a mother, this child is on drugs and this and that, and the mother's saying that, make dua that my son leads salah in Haramain one day. And Sheikh Sulaiman goes, what can I say other than Ameen? I know that that's never going to happen in the current circumstances that this child is in. What can I say other than Ameen? And he mentioned some of the incidents. So really, it's a very harrowing lecture, and it'll probably render you to tears. So maybe not best to listen whilst you're driving. But it's definitely a good lecture. So if you know somebody going through it, etc., send that lecture over, etc., to them. Sheikh Sulaiman Mullah on drugs. I think it's called The Scourge of Drugs, or something like that. Have a listen to it. Even if you're not involved, have a listen to it. I would, my plan is if I'm ever teaching a class on drugs, instead of teaching a class on drugs, I'd say to the kids here, 1 hour, you're going to listen to this lecture. Or put it on the projector, and it's like a movie day or something. They can watch it. Because it's very powerful. I haven't come across something as potent as that. And a lot of these by the way, a lot of social issues, there's a different, like if I sit here and I give you a lecture on it, it's one thing. But if somebody who's kind of in the trenches and engaged in this stuff and they talk about it, it's different. When that guy who was on the streets selling drugs and this and that comes in and talks to the kids and says to them, it ain't what you think it is. That guy who's this? Oh, it's the mic. If some guy comes in and he's been in prison or this and that, and he's been in gangs and he's seen death and families being killed, and he comes and talks about it, that's going to be much more impactful than me sitting here saying it's haram. Khair. Any other questions? Did we cover everything? Yeah? There wasn't anything else, was there? I think you mentioned the last thing. What was that last thing you said? Oh, yeah. Look, in terms of studying knowledge, I would say start with, how old are you? Yeah, 33, you're still young. Somebody who's like 30s and 40s, you're still young, you should be studying Arabic now. Yeah, you're not kids, you should start studying Arabic now. I don't mean Arabic reading, I mean Arabic comprehension. So if you've reached the age of 30 and 40, you need to start, you should have started, but you need to start studying Arabic properly. I had a talk at Jamia for the last 2 days after Asr, get that from their channel, on their YouTube channel. I'm not plugging their channel or something. I'll plug the Saliheen channel as well. I'm just saying, let's be adults. Just go have a listen to those lectures, because I talk a bit more about the Arabic language and engaging with the Quran and the kind of message of the Quran and how there's a responsibility on us. And so I went into some detail. It was 2 sessions that I had, and they were upset that. No, I'm not going to say anything else. So yeah, so make sure you have a listen to that just to get an idea of some of that. So engage with the Arabic language, and the reason you engage with the Arabic language, it gives you access to revelation directly. And we shouldn't treat, look, I will treat you guys as kids so long as you guys treat yourself as kids. I will sit here and not give a legitimate lecture and not do research and present stuff to you and have a proper discussion if you guys are going to be kids. But if you guys are adults and you guys are studying Arabic and this and that, you're going to raise the level of the scholars, you're going to raise the level of education in your kids. Everybody's level of education rises. It starts with you guys. It starts with grassroots. The lowest level of learning in a community will dictate the highest level of learning. Do you understand? Otherwise, it's pointless for the alim to go and study all this fancy stuff. And when he's going to come here, he's going to talk to you guys. Like some of the Arabic tafsir stuff that I would have mentioned, I didn't mention in terms of the connection of words and this and that in a bit more detail. So they're like, I'm going to mention this family, and this is in the Jahada family, and this is in the Allama family, and these are the connotations of this family. And so, it's like they want to discuss these things, but they can't, because that level has to be achieved first. And so you should push your local masjids and stuff like that and say, hey, listen, we'll do the work for you. We found 10 students who want to study Arabic, and if the masjid wants to start, come to me. We have a phenomenal syllabus. I'll share the syllabus content, etc. And you guys can get started after Ramadan or something like that. You'll be joshed up now, so you get started. If you start now, within 2 years, you'll have a good grasp of Arabic and you can take it to the next steps. If you start now, in 2 years, you'll make some progress. If you start in 2 years, you'll make progress after that. If you started 2 years ago, you would have made progress now. You've got to start somewhere, so just start. Any other questions? So then, that will answer the question on what you study. Because then that will give you access to the knowledge itself. And so now you're not playing kind of, because if you don't want to be towed by a truck your whole life. You want to be able to sit at the wheel. And right now, every single one of us, from the age since we're born till we go into the grave, we sat in this car and we think we're driving, but we're being dragged along by the imam. We don't know how to drive this car. The second I learn Arabic and I give myself some of these studies, I can now start driving, and I'll just keep following the imam now. I'll keep following my teacher or the scholar who's kind of directing me, etc. So that comes down to you guys as a community. And so each community, I tell them that whether another community starts or not, if you guys kickstart it, you guys will be kind of leading the way for the other communities to kind of say, we're leveling up our community. So you guys need to get on with it. Khair. Any other questions? Any other questions? I'll wrap it up if there's no questions. Is there a way we can get some comms from the sisters and find out if they have any questions? Oh, so fantastic. You guys kicked them all out, mashallah. No, I'm joking. We good to finish, inshallah? Khair, let's wrap it up there, inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. If somebody comes to me with a question now, yeah?